Hello everybody, and welcome back to Cam Critiques. Monster Hunter Rise was one of my favorite games released last year, and it's probably my favorite game in the Monster Hunter series, so I was pretty excited for its expansion, Sunbreak. And since it released a couple of weeks ago, I've been having a blast with it. If you want to see my full review of the expansion, you can check out the article over at Go Nintendo. It'll be linked in the description. But, now that I've spent my time playing the game, diving into the post-game, and thinking back on my experience with it, I think it's the perfect moment to rank each and every new fight introduced to Rise in the Sunbreak expansion's campaign. So today, I will be ranking the 15 new monsters you fight throughout Sunbreak's story, be they returning from past entries, newly created for Sunbreak, or modified versions of existing monsters. Let's get started with number 15. Number 15. Aurora Somnicanth. Aurora Somnicanth is definitely the most underwhelming fight in Sunbreak. Somnicanth was already one of the less interesting fights in Rise, but I thought replacing its sleep abilities with ice powers might be what it needed to ascend to the heights of Rise's many other great fights. Sadly, the differences here are fairly minimal. The primary difference I noticed between normal Somnicanth and Aurora Somnicanth is the big beam attack inflicting a different status ailment. Instead of being put to sleep, you're frozen. However, this is one of the most obviously telegraphed moves in its moveset. It's pretty easy to dodge. I never found either ailment to be particularly troublesome. Aside from that, Aurora Somnicanth also moves a lot during its fight, constantly sliding and circling around you, which is a change that I actually dislike. It just makes fighting it more obnoxious. Aurora Somnicanth looks neat aesthetically, donning a more pleasant color scheme than the original Somnicanth, but aside from that, the differences are minimal. I felt like the difference between high rank and master rank Somnicanth was more noticeable than the difference between master rank Somnicanth and Aurora Somnicanth. This fight isn't bad, it's just nothing special. Number 14. Pyre Ragna Kadaki. Ragna Kadaki is another fight that I never found to be particularly impressive in Monster Hunter Rise. However, this subspecies is a big step up from Aurora Somnicanth. Fighting Pyre Ragna Kadaki, you'll largely approach it the same way you would normal Ragna Kadaki. It still isn't as much of a difference as I would have liked. But this monster does have a few new moves up its sleeve. They're entirely unique to this version of Ragna Kadaki, they're fun to work around, and they look really neat. They make full use of the combo of fire abilities and spider powers. Pyre Ragna Kadaki also just looks cool. Maybe it could have been a bit more ferocious and fiery, but that's really just a nitpick. This fight isn't entirely unique, but it is an improvement over the original, and it's a fun time. Overall, it's a solid fight. Number 13. Seregios. Seregios has always been a fan favorite monster, but I've never really understood the Seregios appeal. Aesthetically, it's as plain as you can get. It's a brown dragon with next to no distinguishing features. I don't think the design looks interesting, nor do I think that it does a good job of conveying the Seregios gimmick of spiky scales. And Seregios just isn't very fun to fight. Its moveset consists of generic dragon things and a few moves where it throws out spikes that are hard to see, especially in the desert. I don't hate Seregios. Fighting it is fine. But I don't find it particularly engaging. The moveset isn't that unique. It doesn't look that cool. To me, Seregios is another monster that's just kinda there. If you love Seregios, that's great. But this fight just isn't really for me. Number 12. Magma Almudron. Almudron was one of my favorite fights in Rise. It looks neat, Almudron is gigantic though fighting it isn't clunky, and it has a really unique gimmick. And I still love the Magma Almudron fight. Simply changing Almudron's mud to magma drastically alters how you need to approach it. The reason Magma Almudron isn't higher is because I don't necessarily think the changes made were for the better. Magma Almudron is different, but most of those differences just lead to the monster being harder to approach, which I find a little annoying. The moves themselves are very similar between the two Almudrons, simply powered by different elements. And a monster with fire powers isn't exactly the most unique thing in the Monster Hunter universe. Almudron's mud abilities stand out as something a lot more creative and distinct. Magma Almudron looks cool aesthetically. I like that it uses a red and black color scheme that still evokes magma. It's a lot better than just coloring an Almudron orange. And the Magma Almudron fight is actually quite different from the original Almudron fight. I just think it's a little worse. Number 11. Daimyo Hermitar. Daimyo Hermitar is the first new monster you fight in Sunbreak, and I totally see why they placed it there. The fight's fun, and it's nothing like anything else in Rise. but nothing about Daimyo really stands out. Daimyo Hermitaur is a big crab. He looks like a big crab. He fights like a big crab. That's about it. I like crabs, so I'm mostly fine with that. But in a game with so many crazy unique creatures with crazy moves for you to learn, a big crab that hits you with its claws doesn't really stand out at all. I also found Daimyo's big shell to be pretty annoying. I usually play insect lane, so I spend a lot of my time in the air. And when I'm there with that shell, I'm never doing ideal damage. Daimyo is a fight that is all new to Rise, but nothing about Daimyo is very creative. Maybe it wasn't in the base game for a reason. Daimyo can't really stand next to this game's other foes. But I do appreciate the change of pace from the typical Rise fights, which is why Daimyo isn't lower. Though, once I got used to this fight, it lost most of its appeal. Overall, the fight's just okay. Number 10. Blood Orange Bishaten. Blood Orange Bishaten is definitely my favorite new subspecies seen in the Sunbreak campaign. Bishaten was a great fight already, but this monster's gimmick makes the fight harder in a way that's really fun. Instead of throwing around fruits, Blood Orange Bishaten throws around flaming pine cones, and it can do a lot with them. Sometimes they'll explode, other times they'll dart around like spinning tops. No matter what it does with them, it's nothing like anything Bishaten could do before. Blood Orange Bishaten looks cool, and its moveset is pretty different, very creative, and very fun to contend with. While a lot of this fight is similar to that of normal Bishaten, I definitely prefer the Blood Orange Bishaten fight. It's a pretty great monster. Number 9. Shogun Ceanataur. Shogun Ceanataur is what Daimyo Hermitaur should have been. I'm a bit surprised they added both of them. While Daimyo is just a crab, Shogun is a crab with sword arms. It's a cool concept. The fight is much more aggressive than Daimyo, and Shogun's design is a little more distinct as well. It's not just a big crab. It's got a more unique shape, fancy blade arms, and a color that isn't red. Shogun Ceanataur would probably be higher on this list if Daimyo wasn't here. I had already seen a crab, so this didn't feel as unique as it could have. But the fight is a lot of fun. Shogun feels dangerous, it's fun to fight from the air, it looks cool, and there's some creativity present in its moveset. Overall, this is a really good fight. Number 8. Garangolm. Garangolm is the first all-new monster from Sunbreak on this list, and this thing's pretty great. It's a weird rocky gorilla thing with the face of Frankenstein's monster and arms with different elemental abilities. With one mossy arm and one fiery arm, Garangolm can drastically switch the kinds of moves it'll throw at you on the fly. There are a lot of cool moves, it uses both its elements in a clever way, and all the attacks are fun to work around. This fight has great spectacle, creativity, and variety. The only reason Garangolm isn't higher on this list is because the rest of the monsters are just that good. Also, I do wish the Garangolm weapons were a little better. Not getting another set of dual blades with 2 elements was a little disappointing. But Garangolm is fun to fight, it looks cool, and it's very original. All my complaints are largely just nitpicks. Number 7. Gormagala. Gormagala was always a favorite monster of mine, and Sunbreak's iteration may be the best one yet. This monster just looks so cool, and while it lacks any standout moves, the amazing aesthetic carries it very far. Gormagala is a giant, silky, purplish-black dragon with fleshy wings and 6 limbs. It can make all of its surroundings grow darker with its transformation, where its wings pulse with purple energy and it grows ferocious horns. Seeing such an amazing and unique aesthetic fully realized in HD was a highlight of Sunbreak for me. Sadly though, the Gormagala fight itself isn't that special. It's got pretty standard dragon moves that are pretty easy to react to. I wish the moveset lived up to the jaw-dropping aesthetic, but it's not like Gormagala isn't fun to fight. It's just lacking a big flashy move or two. The Gormagala fight is still a good time, and the aesthetic is, as far as I'm concerned, unmatched. Number 6. Espinas. Espinas is not a monster that I ever thought we'd see again. Hailing from Monster Hunter Frontier, an old MMO that never saw a release in English, it's safe to say that the majority of Monster Hunter fans were unfamiliar with this thing. And that's a shame, because this monster is great. Visually, Espinas looks very neat. It pulls off the spiky dragon aesthetic a lot better than Teregios, and the colorful tips of its spikes add a nice flare and do a good job of indicating its elemental abilities. The fight against Espinas is also a blast. It's got some crazy moves, like a beam that paralyzes, poisons, and burns you all at once. Espinas isn't the most original monster of all time. It is a dragon that breathes fire. But, compared to other fire breathers like Rathalos, Espinas is probably my favorite. Hopefully it keeps coming back in future games. Number 5. Astalos. Compared to the other dragons in this series, Astalos stands out a lot. Its main color is neon green. It's got a metallic looking body, wings that look like they're made out of stained glass, and a moveset driven by electric abilities. This aesthetic has always been a personal favorite of mine. It's a lot more cohesive than you'd think, and it does still look like a monster that fits into this universe. I love how this monster takes an almost robotic aesthetic and molds it into something natural. And Astalos is a ton of fun to fight. Its lightning moves are varied, fun to dodge, and they just look really cool. Weaving through beams of lightning to rush towards its head is a blast. Astalos is very unique with a great aesthetic and a fun fight. I've really got nothing bad to say. Sunbreak's roster is just so stellar that a monster this great barely cracks the top 5. Number 4. Lunagaron. Lunagaron is Monster Hunter's take on a werewolf, and it's wonderful. This occasionally bipedal foe has the ability to grow a spiky tail, mane, and claws fully out of ice, and transform into something even more ferocious in its fearsome base form. This transformation looks incredibly cool, and gameplay-wise it delivers as well. It lets Lunagaron utilize a ton of new moves. Luckily, in either form, Lunagaron has a lot of interesting moves that blend ice abilities with melee attacks. It's super aggressive, and no matter what, always fun to take on. Lunagaron looks amazing, the fight is great, and the transformation is one of the best in the entire series. The base form doesn't really look like anything special, but that just makes the transformation all the more impressive. This is definitely a standout monster in all of our eyes. Number 3. Shigaru Magala. Shigaru Magala is a flashier Gore Magala with a more unique moveset. I think I kinda said enough right there. Shigaru Magala does have a worse color palette than Gore Magala, but in my opinion, it more than makes up for this with some of the flashiest, most dangerous moves in the entire game. This fight brings a great Magala aesthetic and actually gives it the moveset it deserves. Honestly, if they kept the color palette of Gore Magala, this might be my number 1. This monster is absolutely amazing. Number 2. Malzeno. Malzeno is Sunbreak's new flagship monster, and it's probably my all-time favorite flagship from this series. This majestic vampire dragon looks incredible and has perhaps the coolest moveset in all of Monster Hunter. Malzeno utilizes its small bat-like allies that rest on its chest to power it up, giving it a super cool visual effect, and driving a large chunk of its moveset. I love how this monster constantly glows red with bats floating around it, though I might love how it fights even more than how it looks. This fight has an entirely unique status effect, one that's very fitting for a vampire. This giant dragon can teleport. This monster has a tail stab move powered by its vampire bat-esque companions, making it look like a red of flames at the tail's end and inflicting the new status effect on all who are hit. Its moveset utilizes the bats in so many cool ways, and it has tons of flair. Overall, Malzeno looks great, and the battle against it is unique and fun. It's pretty much the perfect standard monster. But there's one not so standard fight that I think edges it out. Number 1. Geismagorn. Monster Hunter games usually end with a climactic cinematic boss fight, and Geismagorn is one of the best. This gargantuan monster takes the great aesthetic of Malzeno and brings it to the next level. It similarly utilizes Malzeno's bat-like friends, though across multiple phases it continually pushes their power to heights unimaginable. By the end, these vampire bats help make this thing look like one of the most dangerous creatures in Monster Hunter history. Geismagorn has a ton of moves, often changing between phases, and the fight against it is intense. Some of these moves have a lot of range, and they can take you out fast. They're all well telegraphed though, so every death felt fair. Geismagorn may be a little too big for some. The camera can get a little wonky in the fight. But the spectacle of it all is amazing, and the fight itself is fun and challenging in the best possible way. Unlike some other gimmicky Monster Hunter bosses, you still get to use the same skills you mastered across your other monster hunts in this battle. This monster isn't a cinematic boss because of some weird gameplay gimmick. It just looks cool enough to stand out in a series known for its amazing looking creatures. Overall, Sunbreak brings a ton of great fights to Rise, but this monster in particular truly has it all. Thank you guys for watching this video, I really appreciate it. If you liked it, I'd also really appreciate it if you liked, commented, hit the notification bell, and or subscribed. I'd also recommend you check out some of my other content, like my review of the great Fire Emblem Warriors 3 Hopes. If you want to see additional updates about the channel, follow me on Twitter and Instagram, or join my Discord server. All linked in the description below. Thank you all for watching, have a great rest of your day.